Oh ho ho ho! Okay. Unless you've been living under a rock this summer, you've probably noticed Barbenheimer taking the world by storm. It's literally everywhere. While I have yet to see the Barbie movie, I did finally get to see Oppenheimer in theaters. And let's just say, I have some thoughts. First and foremost, this is not necessarily a review of Oppenheimer, and I won't give any spoilers away. I will just generally say that I would recommend seeing the movie, as long as your bladder and attention span can hold out for the 3-hour runtime. What I really want to talk about is Christopher Nolan as a filmmaker. He's an enigmatic figure in the film industry, revolutionizing how movies are being made today and constantly blowing our minds with what is possible. There are only a few handfuls of directors that are actually household names. Scorsese, Spielberg, or Tarantino, for example. Or even Michael or Zack Snyder. Sorry. Whenever people hear these names, they get hyped for what they're going to do next. Nolan is no different. Ever since The Dark Knight, the hype train for Nolan has left the station and it's not coming back anytime soon. His movies just feel different from any other filmmaker. Sometimes that's a good thing, other times not so much. So what works about a Nolan movie, and what doesn't? The thing that people always bring up about Nolan movies is that they're smart. They are just so effing smart. He is the definition of a high-concept director. And if you don't like it, then you just don't even get it, man.
Yeah, he doesn't even get us, man.
His films almost always hinge on some kind of complex scientific theory that serves as its own metaphorical MacGuffin. Sometimes there's even a physical MacGuffin in the story too, like in Tenet. It's a MacGuffin inside a MacGuffin. Whether the concept is something that the characters in the movie are aware of or not, each of his films does this. Inception's manipulation of dream states is an example of the characters being in on the concept of the film. Memento's backwards narrative is an example of when the audience and the characters are experiencing this concept differently. Regardless, each of his films dives headfirst into suspending disbelief while propelling the audience through spectacle after spectacle. He's really good at this, and every one of his movies I personally have found to be highly entertaining. But I also picture him pitching these ideas like a stoned dude at a party that thinks he's finally unlocked the secrets to the universe. It's like a dream within a dream, man. It's not time travel, bro. It's time inverted. Yeah. Nolan's favorite plaything to bring these heady concepts to life is his manipulation of time. This is clearly seen in how he edits his films. The way he is able to condense time and deliver exposition quickly keeps the audience clued into what the hell is actually going on. And trust me, his movies have a lot of exposition. Sometimes after a Nolan movie, you can feel kind of dazed, like you just sat through a college professor's lecture. But, with a lot more explosions and stuff. His editing style also lends itself to the visual representation of the concept he's trying to bring to life. The scene in Interstellar where they land on the water planet is a perfect example of this. The whole sequence has to feel as real-time as possible in order for the weight of the exponential passage of time to really land. Nolan is so obsessed with time in his films that he edits almost all of them the same way. He loves to intercut between different timelines or bookend his films with the end at the beginning. This can be a great way to build mystery and tension. It can also be a little predictable, convoluted, or even unnecessary. I'm looking at you, Dunkirk. He uses this trope pretty often. It's like he saw Pulp Fiction and confused it for the Holy Grail. With the nature of his movies, he has to focus on world building and establishing the rules in the world he's taking us to. This focus on the details of the concept leads to two things: long runtime and fast pacing. There's a lot of information to convey and a lot of story to be told in a finite window of time. In order for the plot to move forward, we need to understand what is going on and why. Usually, this is at the expense of character development. If we're spending more time focused on understanding the mechanics of the world and the logistics of the plot, then we are spending less time getting to know the characters. This is probably why the main character in Tenet is simply named the protagonist. It's also why women in his movies feel more like plot devices than they do tangible characters. The women in his films are there to serve the story, which is always led by a male leading character.
I'm merely a vessel for storytelling.
Nolan's female characters are always tied to the men, and don't really have their own individual aspirations. They never have a conversation that isn't about the plot or referencing another man in the story. And what is Nolan's solution to underdeveloped characters? Just get big-name, heavyweight actors to play the lead roles, and people will get invested in them just because they're great actors. Seriously though, there are some legitimately great performances in Nolan films. Heath Ledger, Cillian Murphy, Robert Downey Jr., and Matthew McConaughey all gave stellar performances with Nolan at the helm, among many others. But that lends itself more to the talent of the actors and the collaboration process than it does Nolan's writing. Honestly, not the worst strategy, but it's no substitute for good writing and character development. Another staple of Nolan's filmmaking is honestly the biggest draw for me to see his movies. His films are technically impeccable. For starters, you can always expect some jaw-dropping cinematography. It's no secret that he likes to do as much as he can practically, using camera trickery and elaborate set designs to achieve some really awe-inspiring moments. The hallway fight scene in Inception is one of my favorite examples of this, and is one of the best fight scenes I've ever seen in a movie. The effect of inverted time in Tenet, or the atomic bomb in Oppenheimer were all done practically, only using visual effects to enhance the image rather than create it from scratch. This is the spectacle that makes his movies an event. I'd even compare it to Tom Cruise in the Mission Impossible movies. The movies themselves are entertaining and engaging, but you're really looking forward to seeing what kind of batshit crazy stunt he's gonna do this time. Nolan then takes the spectacle to the next level by using IMAX cameras whenever he can, even in a 3-hour movie where 80% of it is just people talking. Nolan also uses sound design to heighten the immersiveness of his films. For me, after seeing Oppenheimer, I would recommend seeing the film on the big screen to really experience the sound design even more than just the cinematography. Oppenheimer has some of the best sound design I have ever heard in a movie. It's loud and bombastic when you least expect it, and it's quiet and reserved when you're expecting the opposite. And even when it is loud and overpowering, it's not just that the volume is cranked up. There's a lot of detail and layers behind the noise. His films usually have a driving and explosive soundtrack that, similar to his editing style, keeps the film moving at a constant, breakneck pace. In fact, the only thing about his films that isn't loud is the goddamn dialogue! Seriously, I wish I had subtitles throughout a movie like Oppenheimer. You could barely tell what anyone was saying behind the loud orchestral music and overpowering sound mixing. This is because Nolan prefers to solely use audio from the actors recorded on set rather than re-recording dialogue in the studio. It's a creative decision, and one that I respect in theory. Of course, you want to capture the performance as best you can, but if you rely so heavily on exposition and constantly explaining things in your movie, then it might help if you could actually hear what the fuck people were saying. So, if you haven't seen Oppenheimer, what should you expect? Well, you can expect just about everything I've been talking about. It's very on brand for a Nolan film. Mind-bending cinematography and sound design, beautiful and sprawling set pieces, some amazing performances by actors doing the heavy lifting on the script's behalf, and really technical concepts that are largely oversimplified to be more palatable. Or not oversimplified and needlessly convoluted. You can also expect poorly written women who are only at the service of the men in the story, and non-linear editing that makes you feel like you're going 100 miles per hour in a bumper car. These critiques in hand, Nolan films are definitely an experience, and they always manage to be entertaining. For me though, Nolan is at his best when he is not dealing with grand scientific concepts like in Tenet, Interstellar, or even Inception. I think his best films are when he is a bit more reserved and not relying on a theoretical concept at the core of the story. Movies like Memento, Insomnia, The Prestige, and Dunkirk work much more effectively from a story perspective because the characters don't take a backseat to the plot. In these films, the story moves forward because of the characters, rather than the story pushing the characters through it. Oppenheimer happens to fall in this category of Nolan films. It's an epic story that still somehow manages to be fairly grounded in the character's journey. It's absolutely a solid film, certainly one of Nolan's best, but in my opinion, a masterpiece it is not. It's a witch's brew of everything good and not so good about Nolan's aesthetic. But you know what? I'll keep coming back for a refill. What do you think? Is Oppenheimer actually a masterpiece? Drop a comment down below and tell me what you thought about Oppenheimer and how you feel about Christopher Nolan as a filmmaker. If you enjoyed this video, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Also check out the links down below for my Discord and Twitch channels. If there's a movie or game you think I should check out next, let me know. In the meantime, be well, and I'll see you in the next video.
Spicy!